Holy moly. That entire GameStop process was a mind twister. And after analyzing everything, I have a lot of thoughts to share with you. But before we jump into it, guys, my name's Spencer. If we've never met, welcome to the channel. I started Gocher's Cards up here in Northeast Oklahoma. I attend some of the shows and make little YouTube videos for the 260 people who like to watch. I recently sent off a submission, a PSA submission through GameStop, and it was 50 cards, 50 Pokemon cards, and we are documenting that process. And now we're going to go through that process. I'm going to explain to you all everything that went on and what I thought about it. I had a slew of things come to mind during the process, and I just decided that it would be easiest if we created a pros and cons list so that you all, the viewer, could decide for yourself what you would like to do personally. And I will let you know towards the end of this video what my plans are for submitting graded cards going forward. So let's start with the pros for sending through GameStop, at least the pros that I could come up with. And if you see me referencing behind the camera, guys, this is a laundry list of stuff, so I do have to use a little bit of a script. So to get started, sending cards through GameStop. I went over this in the original video whenever I submitted the cards, but for those who may not have seen that video, it is cheaper than submitting cards by yourself. And you might ask, Spencer, how is that when cards through GameStop are $19 a piece now, and submitting cards through PSA bulk yourself is $17? You got to remember that there are other costs, not just the grading costs. So when you go through PSA by yourself, you have to pay for the submission fee. You also have to pay for shipping, and you have to pay for insurance, and then all of the materials that go into shipping those cards off. When you go through GameStop, guys, shipping cost to PSA is actually free, and so is the insurance with a little bit of asterisk next to that. We're going to go through that in a bit. But here's the cost breakdown. If I send cards myself to PSA, shipping costs normally run somewhere between $16 and $20 through FedEx. Insurance cost is going to be another $20 to $30 depending on what I'm sending and how much I'm sending. And then there is required return insurance, plus you pay the shipping cost back. And normally that's going to be somewhere between $35 and $50. When you send through GameStop, you avoid paying the insurance cost, and you also avoid paying the return shipping. And as such, you save money there. And most of the time, you are going to be saving money by sending your cards through GameStop for a PSA submission rather than sending them yourself. You also avoid the process of having to input the cards yourself, creating the list yourself, packaging the cards, printing the label, having to properly label the box, knowing how to insure the box properly. The list goes on. You might, I'm going to put might here, save some time going through GameStop rather than submitting the cards for yourself. Mainly if you're maybe slow at the process or you don't know what you're doing. For larger submissions, do keep in mind that GameStop does have a process themselves. And so you might save time. You might also have to spend a little bit of extra time with the GameStop employees while they are putting together your list, taking pictures of everything, and attaching the labels. It could even itself out. It could be longer. It could be shorter. It just kind of depends on the person submitting the cards. Next, some people believe that GameStop orders receive preferential treatment, though I don't have any way of proving this, and neither does anybody else. But I will tell you that the idea behind this is that PSA is trying to strengthen its partnership with GameStop. And the best way to do that is to make the customers that go through GameStop happy so that they will continue to come back and they will refer their friends out to use GameStop for their submission services. The easiest way to make people happy, you might ask? Be more lenient on grades. And as such, people get more 10s. And then some people believe that they end up receiving better grades when they go through GameStop as opposed to sending the cards off themselves, purely based on the fact that PSA might be trying to leverage its relationship with GameStop. Next, this one is a big one, and I got a lot of questions about this. So, GameStop orders seemingly are returning faster to customers than those orders that you submit yourself. And I actually experienced this whenever I sent my submission off. So I have the dates here. I'm going to share them with you. We can speculate, guys, that GameStop is working to make customers happy through this avenue and through this relationship that they have with PSA. I would venture to say that GameStop and PSA on the back end have made a contract to make sure that patrons that go through GameStop get their product back in a timely manner, and that way GameStop maintains a image of professionalism while also being able to provide a service that people are happy with. So here is my example. I had sent two PSA submissions off recently myself. The first one I had sent off, PSA received the cards December 5th of 2024, and they ended up completing that order February 19th of 2025. When you account for Christmas Eve, Christmas, and New Year's as holidays, this was an overall turnaround time of about 51 business days. So pretty lengthy. My second PSA submission that I had sent off by myself arrived to PSA on December 20th and was completed on March 3rd. So again, if you look at the holidays and you subtract those from the overall business days, we end up getting a turnaround time of around 48 business days to get those cards back. Just 3 days shy of that first submission that we had sent off ourselves. So, how does that compare to the GameStop order that I sent off? Well, the order I sent through GameStop was dropped off on January 11th. It was sent out that Monday, which was January 13th. We can assume it took about 2 days to reach the facility. And the day that PSA receives your order, they count as day zero. That was January 15th. So we can assume that day one started on January 16th. With that in mind, I picked this order up from my GameStop on March 7th, which was an overall turnaround time of 37 business days. It was substantially faster than the two orders I had out under my own account. Now, I have some thoughts on this. I think it's kind of ridiculous that PSA is having people pay for PSA submission memberships and then getting cards back with substantially more turnaround time than those who go through GameStop and don't pay a dime for that membership. But that's probably for another video. Another pro. You can use your $5 GameStop monthly pro credit toward any upcharges you may accrue. This is probably not that big of a deal for most people, but hey, $5 is $5, right? So it is technically a pro that you can use free money to pay for any upcharges that you may receive. What did my upcharges look like? How did GameStop respond? So my upcharges were different in store than what I was supposed to pay according to the app. I was supposed to pay $74.99 for my Bubble Mew, which received a PSA 10, and I was supposed to pay $19.99 in upcharges for my Leafeon VMAX from Evolving Skies that received a PSA 10. However, when I got to GameStop, they charged me $63 total for the two in upcharges, and then I was able to use my $5 credit and bring it down to $58. I don't understand exactly how that works or why that happened. It could be a promotion that PSA runs through GameStop whenever you submit your cards through them. Maybe they reduce the cost of the upcharges. I'll be honest, I didn't ask because I didn't want them to tack on the extra, I don't know, $30, 30, $35. So I just rolled with it. But if you have had a similar experience or if you had something that contradicted that, leave it down in the comments. I'd love to hear whether or not that is a common theme. Something that is I think it's a big deal. It might not be that big of a deal to some people, but I think it's a big deal. Uh, Keep in mind, you earn points with GameStop through your pro account when you spend money with them, and that includes PSA submissions. So I sent off 50 cards for an $800 submission, and for that submission, I earned over 20,000 GameStop points. Now, when you compare, what that's actually worth to how much I spent on that submission, it's a minuscule amount, probably 20, 25 bucks worth. Uh, However, if you submit the card yourself through PSA, you don't receive that back in points. So beggars can't be choosers. Get that whenever you go through GameStop. I'd rather have $30 than not have $30. And every once in a while, I do like buying packs through GameStop. So that was a nice benefit that I noticed. So PSA obviously have given us a lot to consider when going through GameStop. There's a lot of pros to it. I could probably keep going if I sat down and thought about it a little bit more. But with those pros in mind, let's now talk a little bit about the cons of going through a GameStop for your PSA submissions. The first major red flag that I noticed when asking GameStop employees about the process was, how does the insurance process work if something were to go wrong with my cards in your possession? The GameStop employee that I was working with was fantastic. However, his answer was a little bit corporate, right? He said GameStop collectibles would reach out if something went wrong with my order. But honestly, that's all that he knew. Now, when I went to go pick the cards back up, I let him know that I had a lot of people watching the videos that wanted a little bit of clarification on that specific question. But again, in a very similar response, he told me that GameStop Collectibles reaches out, and that's about all he knows. Then he backtracked just slightly and he said, now that I think about it, all cards that we send off are sent off under the bulk tier, which means every card is valued at $200 maximum. Okay. So if a card goes missing, if a submission goes missing, those cards are insured up to $200 a piece. Here's the warning for you all. If you're sending a card that is worth more on its way there or back from PSA than $200, you are running a risk because they are not going to provide any more than $200 per card in insurance. So if your mail is lost, if it is stolen, if you send off a bubble mew like I did and then it gets a PSA 10 and it's worth 900 bucks on return, but for some reason it is not at that GameStop when you're ready to pick it up, you're insured for 200 bucks. That's all you get. So, had anything gotten lost, I would have been out a lot of money because I sent some cards that were worth a lot more than 200 bucks. So, that's something to keep in mind. Next, GameStop doesn't submit cards at any other tier than bulk. They're not going to send your high end cards at a different tier for a faster return. They're not going to send them at a higher insurance coverage. As such, you're going to be upcharged for anything that goes beyond that $200 threshold. However, you're going to have to wait the same amount of time as the rest of your bulk cards to get them back. And again, if anything goes wrong, you're not going to be reimbursed for the amount that the cards are worth because they only have insurance up to $200, which is the declared value on bulk submissions to PSA. Another big con for this is a big con for me. I've got some friends who send off through GameStop all the time. They don't seem to think it's a big deal for them. It is for me. I am a flipper, reseller, whatever you want to call it. I go to shows, I pick up cards for, cheaper than what they go for market price, and then I move them at market, and I use that to fund more submissions, more of my collection, and grow the hobby for me, right? So a big con for me was GameStop requires that the submission be paid up front rather than waiting until the cards are fully graded and sent back. So when you send a submission off yourself to PSA, PSA does not charge your card until the submission is complete, which is fantastic because right now, during busy times when PSA is getting slammed, let's say it's 2 or 3 months before you get your submission back, sometimes 4 months. You have that money that entire time because they're not charging you until it's time to get your submission back. So that means hypothetically, that submission that I sent off to GameStop, I could have had $800 sitting in my pocket to use for flipping cards or buying out collections and reselling them. However, when I submitted through GameStop, GameStop required that $800 be paid upfront. Why was that a problem? Well, I can't use that money to make money. So while those cards are gone, I am just out the $800 until they return. Now, you could make the argument that GameStop was able to get my cards back quicker than PSA is whenever I just go straight through them. And maybe that saves me some money because time is money. But again, I couldn't use that $800 to make money while the cards were off because GameStop had taken that payment up front. This may be a win for some people, just depending on whether or not you have the funds or if you have the self control. Some people don't have the self control or, unfortunately, the funds to be able to afford all of that. And so being forced to pay the piper up front and then you're just out the money but it's already paid for, you don't have to worry about it, that can be a pro for some people. For me, I do like being able to have access to all that submission money until it is time for me to receive that submission back. And so by not having that, it kind of left a sour taste in my mouth. I just didn't like it very much. And I understand why GameStop has to do it. Totally. They don't have the cards that, PSA is holding as leverage for you to pay. And if they didn't make you pay up front, they wouldn't have the money. So in a sense, they would be providing that service for free, especially if some people decided not to pay for their submissions and pick their cards up. So I get it. It's just not something that I liked. It was probably one of the biggest cons for me personally. Another con, GameStop's app for tracking your submission shows basically the same steps along the way that PSA's tracker does. But the problem is it doesn't update on time. And for some people, it doesn't update at all. Mine took several weeks to update from sent to PSA received. Now, the problem with that for me is I want to know if FedEx has messed up and lost my package, is hanging on to it. Maybe it's making its way around the US and I need to be able to intercept it. But because they don't update it on time, you don't ever really know whether your cards were received or if they're just making a trip around the US. So that was a big problem for me personally. Mine took several weeks to change from sent to received. And it only changed once I emailed them to let them know, hey, I just want to make sure that my sub wasn't lost in the mail and I want to make sure that you received it. Once the submission got through research and ID, it started to move fairly quickly through assembly, uh, quality assurance, graded, and then eventually ready for pickup. So if GameStop could, update their app to show true timeline, it would be just as good as the one that PSA offers through their app. But keep in mind, I do know people that have gone the entire submission from shipped to ready for pickup without ever seeing their GameStop app update one time. Ultimately, guys, you also need to be aware of this. When you add another party to the equation to handle your collectibles, there's always a chance someone with bad intentions takes your stuff. In the last week alone, I have unfortunately seen a few cases scrolling through Facebook groups where people had their submission update to be ready for pickup. And when they got there, the GameStop employees claimed that the package never showed up. Many of them are waiting to hear resolutions from GameStop collectibles as to how they're going to be reimbursed. But I can tell you right now, I know at least one of these subs where the guy is going to be completely screwed. He had several of the chase hits from Prismatic Evolutions that hit PSA 10s. And now suddenly they're missing out of thin air, and he doesn't know what's going to happen because he hasn't heard back from them yet. This is a calculated risk that you take when you submit your cards through GameStop rather than submitting them yourself. However, there are thousands upon thousands of people nationwide that have been utilizing this service and haven't had any problems, myself included, with this most recent submission. And I have so far only seen a few complaints. But do bear in mind, if your collectibles go missing, it could be disastrous for you. This one was interesting. I wasn't a big fan of this con as well, but PSA is not going to discuss the status of the submission with you, even though they are your cards. I reached out to PSA because my sub had not updated as received. And the email I got back literally said, due to privacy and security reasons, I am not able to provide any order or account information to anyone but the account holder. Since GameStop is the one that sent it off for me, they would only talk to GameStop. But since GameStop is a corporate giant, they won't reach out on my behalf or your behalf to check on your order status. They're simply going to tell you to wait, and there's nothing that they can do. So you lose a lot of control over your PSA submission when you send your cards through a third party like GameStop. You basically lose your voice. Ultimately, guys, this is a give and take proposition, and only you can decide for yourself what is the best course of action as to whether or not you want to submit your cards yourself or through GameStop. I do believe I will be using GameStop again in the future to take advantage of faster turnaround times, but I won't be sending cards like my Bubble Mew through them anymore. I will stick to cards valued around $200 or under in PSA 10s when I do go through them again. That way I can make sure if something does go wrong, I will get fully reimbursed for the cost of the card. I still enjoy the benefits of having a PSA membership and being able to send cards myself if I want to, and that's something I will continue to do in the future. I have a 46 card submission sitting on my desk that I'm about to send off myself. I do like having a bit more control over the communication aspect of my submission, and also being able to do something about a sub in the shipping phase if something is holding it up. I also wasn't too stoked again about having to pay upfront for that submission and being out that money the entire time. For me, sending cards through GameStop's more of a it's more of a tool than it is a complete rebrand of my grading strategy and process, which is okay. That's totally okay. It's not what I had expected or hoped for. You know, I was hoping, hey, this is going to revolutionize the way that I do things, and I'm going to cancel that submission, that PSA membership tomorrow. But that's just not what happened. So it's okay. It's just not what I had expected when I sent the submission off. Guys, I really hope that this video and the ones that came before it were helpful to you, and that you can use it to help make an informed decision as to which way you should go with either grading yourself or sending your cards through GameStop as a middleman service. If you've got any questions I did not answer in this video, please leave them in the comments down below. I will make sure to get back to every single one of you, even if the answer is I don't know. But thank you so much for being a part of this journey and showing so much interest in my GameStop series. I look forward to bringing you future content like this. Make sure to sub down below, guys. Watch that recommended video, and we will see you next time. Peace.